Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks again for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up on the warning chart here, you can see all of the interior north of the Alaska Range, either under advisories or winter storm warnings here. St. Lawrence Island and Seward Peninsula, right through the central interior, all the way to the border here, all of the Tanana Valley, back out to the northwest coast there, western Arctic coast, central coast eastward here with less wind, winter weather advisories out, snow and blowing snow, but this entire area, winter weather or winter storm warnings, mostly for tonight and holding through tomorrow here over the eastern area, while the areas back to the west start to improve with, again, more snow and visibility is reduced to less than a quarter mile at times and blowing snow. Winter weather advisories here for the Alaska Range area for winds gusting to 40 miles per hour and visibility is occasionally reduced to a half mile or less. Moving on to yesterday's satellite imagery, we had one system down here to the southeast moving off, clearing out over the Panhandle, and moisture streaming eastward here across south central Alaska up into the interior. All the precipitation still out to the west through tomorrow afternoon. And kind of a warm front there pushing across Kodiak Island. Cold air, unstable air out here over the western Bering Sea. Main low pulling up into the Russian Far East there. Cold unstable air flowing in from the southwest. And today we can see that system here came across south central Alaska, brought all the snow up into the eastern interior. That's moving eastward here and into the eastern Gulf of Alaska. Southwest flow brought warmer temperatures and rain to much of the southeast coast. And another system, pretty strong system here, pushing in across the Bering Strait, just west of the Bering Strait, with more snow and blowing snow coming in with that. Snow right through here all the way up to the north and breaking out a little bit there over the Pribilof, but windy conditions all across the Alaska Peninsula today. And the Aleutians there, more moisture streaming northward here will bring rain into the eastern Aleutian areas tonight. And another developing storm and strong frontal system out here to the west. That's brought wind gusts over 60 miles per hour today at Shemya, and there'll be storm and gale force winds with that as it pushes eastward. On the chart, it's still out there, actually southeast of the Komodorsky Islands. Warm southerly winds, rain out that way. Here's that system pulling into the Chukchi Sea that brought pretty strong wind gusts today. Savunga seeing gusts to about 63 miles per hour earlier today. And Nome also snow blowing snow, quarter mile visibilities, gusting 55 miles per hour. And Tin City, one of the strongest wind gusts at 71 miles per hour, while even over the interior here, Indian Mountain winds gusting to 35, snow and blowing snow, visibilities at times down to a half or even a quarter mile or less in that area, with also even on the Arctic coast here associated with this low and a trough extending eastward there. Barrow, also near blizzard conditions with winds gusted to 51 miles per hour. And that's shifting eastward as well with the snow over the interior here. So one batch already pulled off to the east over the eastern Copper River Basin after bringing the 2 to 3 inches here south central Alaska, up to 7 at Hatzer Pass, even heavier amounts up to 15 inches over portions of the Tanana Valley. And for tonight, again, that low center here will track eastward and weaken into a trough right about in that area there, but you can see quite a strong gradient over the eastern interior, lessening a little bit here out to the west. with the 1,045 millibar high down to the south. Snow, blowing snow, winter storm warnings out again north of the Alaska Range, all the way up across the eastern Brooks Range area. And again, conditions will gradually improve a little bit out here as the night wears on. Look for some clearing to occur along the southwest coast, precipitation free at least here, even up towards St. Lawrence Island. But winds quite gusty and still windy there for St. Lawrence Island right out of the south, and that system pushes eastward. Again, storm and gale force winds with this, especially out in advance of the front. Northward to the Pribilofs, look for rain. Southward there, Adak and Atka, spreading into the eastern Aleutians, possibly toward the Alaska Peninsula late tonight. And then more showery and colder temperatures wrapping back in around the low center out to the west. Meanwhile, this system drops southeastward here, so snowfall levels are going to crash as that moves southeastward. So rain and snow in advance of that this evening will change over to snow, but then end here in the drier, colder air coming in from the northeast. And then for tomorrow, that whole system all the way down into southwest Canada, Vancouver Island. Skies clear out. Pretty breezy there over the Panhandle with definitely colder temperatures. All the clouds and light snow now back up over Canada, and conditions improving here over the eastern interior, but still pretty breezy, but a lot less snowfall. Strong high pressure building in right over the Talkeetna Mountains, western Copper River Basin area, and that's going to make for a clear day here over south central Alaska with light winds. But out to the west, strong front pulling eastward here, and again 55-knot southerlies in advance of that system right up to the Pribilofs. Good gales up across St. Lawrence Island. Again, a lot of warm air flowing northward here, so a mixture of precipitation coming into Kotzebue Sound, Silhouette, Kobuk Valleys, some snow out in advance of that, and just clouds here over the western interior areas. Maybe a little bit of moisture here, and that should be a couple of rain symbols, not snow symbols there, and moisture also coming up and mainly affecting the southern side of the Alaska Peninsula there with some low clouds, fog and drizzle. Otherwise, rain breaks out to scattered showers and then numerous snow showers sweeping in around behind that low center. And then for Sunday, New Year's Day, this front continues eastward here, kind of hangs up along the southwest coast, but weakens considerably. Again, areas of rain, fog here from the Alaska Peninsula, edging over toward Kodiak Island, be pretty light there. And then kind of a mixture here over the Yukon Delta areas up to the northwest, and probably staying as snow there back northwest of the front across Kivalina, Kotzebue, Red Dog in those areas. Not a lot here going on along the Arctic coast in the way of precipitation with that downsloping southwest wind coming off the Brooks Range. Eastern interior staying pretty good here, clear weather, light winds, high pressure weakening a little bit, holding here over right over the Susitna Valley areas, and also, but some moisture will probably increase the clouds, especially western Cook Inlet, with maybe a little bit of mixed precipitation, possibly developing along the Alaska Range. Otherwise, the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, all looking good, clear skies, excuse me, and lighter winds. Out to the west, another system coming northward here, that'll bring some kind of a wintry mix in the way of precipitation to the central Aleutians there with the colder air back to the west, and this front mostly staying west of St. Lawrence Island there as it tracks up to the northeast. Temperatures across the Panhandle today were mostly, well, quite a range, lower 30s, lower to mid 30s here. Wrangell and Petersburg, 30 degrees at Hyder, so whatever fell there is mostly in the form of snow. 37 Juneau with rain, Skagway rain, 40 degrees. They had winds gusting at least to 40 miles per hour earlier today. Lower 40s along the coastal areas, both at Port Alexander and Sitka with 43, 36 Yakutat, 34 Cordova down to 30 in Valdez. Nome up to 41, 37 at Seward, 32 there at Kenai, 10 degrees cooler at Palmer, and about 11 at Talkeetna. And McCarthy up to 24, 10 degrees at Northway, upper 20s here over the mid-Tanana Valley with 20s extending back to the west, and then single numbers over the Fort Yukon area. Bettle's 8 above. And north of the Brooks Range, though, warmer temperatures, 23 at Umiat Airfield, while the Arctic coast mostly in the teens to lower to mid-20s. Kotzebue had 22, 31 at Tin City, right at the freeze mark, both at Shishmaref and Nome, with 36 at Savunga, 30 degrees there at McGrath. Kaltag, 29, 34 at Unalakleet, 34 at Amonic here, and warming into the at least above freezing there, places like Bethel and Marshall, 36 at Macoriac, same thing at Savunga. And then for the Pribilofs, upper 30s, near 40 here across all of the Aleutians, all the way to Unalaska, False Pass at 40, and then mid-40s or mid-30s to lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak, 40 degrees even. Lows for tonight, a little below 0 over the Copper River Basin, of course, with the clear skies. Temperatures 0 to 15 above for south central Alaska. Mid-20s Kodiak Island, and milder up through here with the winds and southwesterly flow. So mid-20s to actually probably mid-30s here in these areas. Single numbers Brooks Range northward, and 20s here for the Panhandle. High temperatures shaping up like this, upper 20s to mid-30s here for the southeast coast. Warmer out along the coastline like at Sitka, and 20s to near 30 here for the North Gulf Coast. Single numbers Copper River Basin. Looks like mostly in the 20s tomorrow, south central Alaska. West of the Alaska Range, though, mid to upper 30s here, all the way down across Bristol Bay. Northward to Kotzebue, forecasting a high of 31 there. And the Arctic coast, North Slope areas, 5 to 15 for the highs in that area. 40s, Pribilofs and the Aleutians, except out west there behind the front, 35 at Shemya. IFR tomorrow, again, all that moisture streaming eastward tonight. So starting out the day early tomorrow with a lot of IFR through the central interior. Also along the western Alaska Range into northern Bristol Bay, but VFR south central Alaska, becoming mostly VFR there over the Panhandle, and a big slug IFR here out over the Bering Sea. And then for tomorrow afternoon, that shifts eastward here and narrows, bulk of it heading up to the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island area, also along the upslope areas there with the western Brooks Range, downsloping into VFR there north of the mountains, but some marginal conditions along the Arctic coast, increasing VFR here over the central and eastern interior, and Kodiak Island looking good, marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula. Passes, Anaktuvik, IFR gradually becoming marginal. Also look for some improving conditions during the day for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR the entire day, same forecast for rainy. Windy though, starting out IFR and then becoming VFR. Isabel, improving trend as well, starting out marginal, becoming VFR. Mentasta though may start out IFR, but again, all becoming VFR tomorrow afternoon. Tanita, same trend. And Portage, VFR. Chilcoot White, VFR. For the freezing levels at the surface here in North Gulf Coast, again cutting across the Panhandle, and then 6,000 feet up to the Alaska Peninsula, and warm air all the way up to St. Lawrence Island here along the southwest coast, and even warmer push of air ahead of that next strong frontal system edging eastward here, and those strong, very strong southerly winds. Icing areas of light isolated moderate, except from the Pribilofs on down, probably an occasional widespread area moderate icing there above about 7,000 feet. Also for the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula area, and some of that spreading northeastward, and icing ends here over the eastern interior areas. Jet stream, actually 33,000 feet aloft, big ridge of high pressure here south of Kodiak. The strong southerly winds, 150 knots across the central Aleutians, western Bering Sea, northwest 120, catching the eastern Arctic coast, coming back to northerly at the same speed there, right into the Panhandle. 9,000 feet here shows northwesterlies, 25 to 30 for the Panhandle. Very strong west-southwesterlies, 30 to 60 knots here over the eastern interior, right into the central interior. And then the really strong winds ahead of that strong front here, 85 knots coming across Nikolsky, 80-knot winds up to Nunivak Island, 70 knots St. Lawrence Island, and the Bering Strait at about 50, 10 to 20 here, south central Alaska into the Gulf, and then westerlies at 40 knots for the Aleutians. Same pattern at 3,000 feet. Again, a little bit lighter on these winds, but still quite strong, 45 to 70 knots and to 60 knots there into the northern Bering Sea. Winds kicking up to 40 knots eastern Arctic coast, and then those 35 to 45 knot winds over the eastern interior. Much lighter south of the Alaska range, but winds on the increase here over the western interior. 35 to 40 knot westerlies following the front in behind, and winds not too bad over the southeast coast. South coast, though, up to 35 knots. And for turbulence, occasional moderate chop here, mostly the southern panhandle there. And then also with those gusty winds on the eastern interior areas, that's probably from about Eagle northward there to the eastern Arctic coast, occasionally moderate, mechanical turbulence below 5,000 feet. And then severe, pretty likely here for the Nikolsky area up to about Nelson Lagoon, and also from the Pribilofs all along the southwest coast up to St. Lawrence Island, especially for small aircraft below about 6,000 feet, and improving out to the west. And after hangar flying, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening is Tim Veenstra. I've known Tim for a number of years. In fact, I first met him in conjunction with work with drones. But let me back up and start earlier in his career. Tim moved to Alaska in 1981 as an A&P mechanic and private pilot. He had a mobile maintenance shop at Lake Hood. In the mid-'80s, he got into fish spotting and flight instructing. Through his contacts with UAF researchers, he got into the remote sensing world. That led to contacts with NOAA and the fascinating world of technology and aviation. His involvement with ghost nets is particularly interesting. In fact, let's start there. Tim, welcome to Hangar Flying.
Thank you, Harry.
What are ghost nets?
Ghost nets are high seas drift nets that have been abandoned or lost in the ocean. And so specifically the Pacific Ocean, these ghost nets can be as long as 30 miles long. And when they're lost or abandoned, it's been illegal fishing for a long time, but there's still these nets that have been out there floating around. And they eventually entangle wildlife, albatross, sea turtles, monk, seals, etc. And then at some point they end up washing ashore, either Hawaii or the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula.
So they're a big problem.
They end up being a real big problem. It's an unknown factor of how much they impact the environment. So NOAA had been working for years cleaning these nets off of the coral reefs in the Hawaiian archipelago. And we ended up getting involved with a program that was funded from the late Senator Ted Stevens. Had gotten some NASA funding to go to study potentially the problem of these ghost nets.
So tell me how you got involved.
I'd been at a conference where Senator Stevens was giving the keynote address, and we ended up putting in a proposal that we would use remote sensing technologies, airborne remote sensing, and then also satellite remote sensing technologies to find these ghost nets while they're still in the Pacific Ocean before they impact the coastline.
So what kind of equipment were you using? Were you using unmanned aircraft?
No, at that point it was all manned aircraft, and this was coming out of work that I had done mostly in the Alaskan waters with NOAA folk and some UAF folk doing fisheries research. So the sensors that we were bringing were including LIDAR, obviously RGB color sensors, water temperature, everything that we could do, ocean color from the airplane itself. And we would use the very similar sensors that were on satellites. So the satellite technology was narrowing the Pacific Ocean down to areas of convergence where we assumed these nets and other debris were gathering, known as the garbage patch. It's been in the news for many years, known as the garbage patch.
So when you say manned aircraft, talking about helicopters aboard a ship?
For the GhostNet project, when we did the Gulf of Alaska work, which was sort of a test flight, we were in a twin-engine Beechcraft King Air. But when we actually were out in the middle of the North Pacific, it was aboard a NOAA P-3 aircraft.
Oh. So how did you, or did you make a transition ultimately to unmanned aircraft?
After that project, which was in 2005, we did the NOAA P3 flights, and we very successfully proved that we could find areas of convergence where these nets were, and actually find nets in these areas. So at that point, it became an operational question. A P3 is not operationally economical, and a drone or an unmanned aircraft operating from a ship seemed to be the only solution that was a viable solution.
So did you, and your company, did you actually build a drone specifically for that mission?
We did. In 2005, there was very little drones commercially available. So we looked at what was out there, and then we proposed to NOAA that we could build our own drone, including the autopilot. And we all agreed that that was the direction we were going to go. So my company took that, and in 2007, we had our first flight with our unmanned aircraft off of Hawaii. And then in 2008, we were again on a NOAA ship up in the convergence area looking for these ghost nets.
So I think that's about the time we met. Didn't you bring your vehicle to one of the Alaska Interest Group conferences?
Yes, it was during those years I became aware that you had that workshop going at the OAS facility there in Lake Hood. And it just seemed a natural fit, so I started attending, and we got to know each other.
Well, you were a real pioneer in that area. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. What I want to do is get you back on and finish up a little bit with some of your early dealings with the FAA and unmanned aircraft.
All right, it'd be a pleasure.
We'll get you back on. Thanks for being on the program tonight.
Thank you, Harry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program, and brought to you by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. And I recommend you go to our website, aasfonline.org, or you check us out on our Facebook page. And until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back. Over the last 24 hours, there's been a big significant reduction here of the ice south of Nunivak Island, and probably this whole area along the ice edge pushing east and north with those strong winds. And some of this may open up here through the Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea over the weekend, into the first of next week, due to the continued southerly winds, and also ice here in Norton Sound may push onto the coast there near Nome. Moving on to marine forecasts, windiest conditions south coast tomorrow, 30 to 40 knots right out of the North Seas, 18 to 20 feet. Small craft advisories north to northwest, 25 to 30 on the inside waters. Small crafts also 25 to 30 knots out of the northwest for the north coast. For Sunday, those come down to 20 knots from the northwest and all the way down here to the south, still holding on to 25 knots on the south coast, but seas diminishing as well, running from 7 feet to 11 feet. Really light winds now for northern Lynn Canal, 10 knots, 2-foot seas, maybe 15 for Stevens Passage, and Clarence Strait north at 20. Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, pretty light winds tomorrow from varying directions at 10 knots with slight seas. Northwest 25 here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, becoming westerly, and then southwesterly at 20 knots. Barren Islands and Kodiak, south 20 for Shelikof Strait, and then southeast 15 in the afternoon there for Kamishak Bay. And then southerlies 20 knots here from Shelikof Strait, Kamishak Bay, turn southeast 20 south of the Forelands. Northern Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, continued light wind conditions, and west to southwest 15 for the North Gulf Coast, but small craft advisories here, Barren Islands and along the east side of Kodiak Island. For the Alaska Peninsula, south to southeast, 40 knots tomorrow, seas 13 to 15 feet. Small craft advisories here, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, as well as Bristol Bay. And then for Sunday, south 30 knots for the peninsula, south 25 here, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, southeast 30 for Bristol Bay with 8-foot seas. And then for tomorrow, again tonight, storm force winds pushed across the central Aleutians, and then drop back to 30 to 35 behind the front, and then back up to 40 from the southwest out to Shemya. In advance of the front, 55 knots out of the south for the eastern Aleutians. And then for Sunday, Kind of a more variable wind pattern out here, 20 to 30 knots there for the Fox Islands. Otherwise southeast, increasing back to gales there for the central Aleutians, to west of Adak, and then turning westerly at 30 knots from Amchitka to Shemya. And for the southwest coast, south winds 45 knots tomorrow, seas 19 to 21 feet. Southeast increasing to 40 knots St. Lawrence Island. Storms here for the northern Bering Sea, south 55 knots, 30-foot seas for St. Paul and St. George. But on Sunday, those really drop off down to 15 knots and the seas cut in half. 35-knot gales there south of Nunivak Island, but just southwest 20 north of Nunivak Island. St. Lawrence Island, south 30, 40-knot winds from the northern Bering Sea. Arctic coast, strongest winds here, central coast 25 increasing to 30 knots as you head west, out of the west, southwest 20, and then southerlies 25 knots turn southeast there up to Cape Beaufort. And then on Sunday, we have gale force winds, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort there, 30 knots to the south, 30 knots here for the western coast, and 25. So brisk wind advisories all through these areas for Sunday. And south to southeast, 15 to 20 for the eastern coast. And tonight, again, winter storm warnings out for a big chunk of the interior here, right up to the Brooks Range with winter weather advisories for the eastern Arctic coast. Again, more snow and blowing snow advancing eastward here through the interior with that low center weakening into a trough, and then conditions improving to the west and southwest. And colder air follows this system into the panhandle tonight with falling snowfall levels. Strong front, as I mentioned, gale force and storm force winds, mostly storm force actually, with warmer air and rain up to the Pribilofs. That pushes eastward tomorrow. Windy, wet weather right up to the Seward Peninsula. Drying out here with light winds for the North Gulf Coast. And then for Sunday, that system comes inland and weakens, and another one enters the western Aleutians. Have a great weekend.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.